I'm Pat Tully, Director of the Ketchikan Public Library, and I'm going to talk about how the library responded to the pandemic, what we learned, and what permanent changes we've put in place as a result. When 2020 began, we, or at least I, was filled with optimism. A new decade had begun, and the library was fully staffed for the first time in over a year. Head of Children's Services, Amy Tupfer, started in November 2019, and we were all in awe of her energy and creativity. Amy organized several popular children's events during her first few months at the library, including the New Year's Eve party on December 31st and the Stuffed Animal Sleepover Storytime. In early January, Lana Clark started work as part-time library assistant in adult services. Lana's hours ensured that we could provide full weekend and evening services. The library was open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Thursday through Saturday, and 1 to 5 p.m. Sunday. Children's Library Assistant Rebecca Jackson was planning the third season of the Children's Community Garden, and Lisa Pearson had just restocked the seed library for the spring. At the end of January, a group of us took part in the Arts Council's Wearable Art Show 2020, as we do every other year. Our entry was called Genreification, and each of us represented a different literary genre. I remember one night standing in the audience for the Ratfish Wranglers' opening number, White Rabbit, and the place being so packed it was hard to move. Just 6 weeks later, it would have been unimaginable to be in such a crowded space. This is our original March 2020 calendar. We had great plans for spring break, a variety of programs and events scheduled throughout the spring, and we were well on our way to planning our children's and teen summer reading programs. Then came COVID. In early March, we put out hand sanitizer and moved chairs so that people could social distance. But we got the word on March 14th that we'd be closing to the public. The library, with other city departments, was closed from mid-March through mid-May 2020. For most of that time, staff also had restricted access to the building. We took turns coming in once a day to water plants and check for leaks or other building issues. Staff worked from home to the extent that they could do so, and we met online via WebEx once a week to coordinate our activities and to check to make sure that we were all doing okay. You know how in the movie The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy and Toto go from a sepia-toned Kansas to the Technicolor land of Oz? It felt a little bit like that, only in reverse. For the next year and a half, in response to pandemic conditions, we, along with everyone else in Ketchikan and in the world, had to adapt to rapid changes due to the pandemic. The library closed and opened several times as Ketchikan's COVID risk level waxed and waned. And the services and library access we were able to provide varied widely with CDC recommendations, state mandates, and city requirements. Fortunately, the library staff was amazingly creative in coming up with and implementing ideas to safely provide library materials and services. During lockdown, we had to concentrate on the services we could provide remotely. We heavily advertised our online resources, the Alaska Digital Library for electronic and audiobooks, and also online resources such as the Home Improvement Reference Center and Auto Repair, which provide very detailed schematics and instructions for do-it-yourselfers. So we were doing what we could to provide books and other materials for our patrons during lockdown. But what about programs, which before the pandemic had been in person? We went from this pre-pandemic calendar in March to this pandemic lockdown calendar in April. Within a few weeks of lockdown, Amy Tupfer, Rebecca Jackson, and Anne-Marie Marasoni of Children's Services started recording and posting story times on Facebook and YouTube. Lisa Pearson and Gail Brooks in Adult Services quickly followed with Facebook-crafted cookery programs, and Teen Advisory Group liaison Kelly Johnson recorded school hacks with tips for young teens going into high school and Next Real Life programs for high school students approaching graduation. I myself started posting a weekly adult reading aloud program on Facebook. This way, we were able to provide programming to people with home internet access. But we were concerned that we were not reaching the whole community, including people who did not have a computer at home. So we got in touch with our neighbors at KRBD Community Radio and Charlotte Glover. Charlotte was planning to take a few months' break from her radio program, Book Talk, and KRBD offered us her slot temporarily for a half-hour read-aloud program. Several library staff members volunteered to take turns reading a story, essay, poem, or part of a book for the radio program we named Reading the Classics. Our first program aired on April 30th, 2020, and we're still going strong 2 years later. The library's strict lockdown ended in early May 2020. For a few weeks, the library remained closed to the public, but we were able to provide curbside service, in which people went online and put items on hold using their library account, and could pick them up in front of the library the next day. For people without library accounts, we teamed up with the Friends of the Library to offer free grab bags of 5 books, selected by age group and interest, from the Friends inventory of donated and withdrawn books. Folks loved grab bags, whether or not they had a library account. In fact, both grab bags and curbside service were popular until we reopened to the public on May 26th for what we called grab and go services. The idea was to limit as much as possible the amount of time people congregated, but still give people a chance to browse the shelves. We offered curbside service for people who felt uncomfortable coming into the building, but once the building was open, very few people requested curbside. The only seating available at this time was for people using one of our public computers for up to an hour. Almost all of our furniture was stored in the large meeting room or in the children's library, which was not open to the public. We did have a selection of our most popular children's books and DVDs available for browsing in the main library, and if people requested a particular title, we would go into the children's library to retrieve it. Rebecca Brown, our outreach librarian, was not able to make her regular visits to the Ketchikan Correctional Center, the Pioneer Home, or senior centers. These were locked down for the health of their residents. She did begin what we called ding-dong ditch deliveries to homebound patrons on their request, and with permission, regularly called homebound patrons to check in with them. Our children and teen summer reading program started on June 1st. They were mostly online, but we did have a way for kids to participate in each program without needing to have home computer access. Around this time, the children's and teen programs premiered Maker Bags. A Maker Bag contains a take-home craft or experiment with all the supplies and instructions needed inside the bag. It has proven one of our most popular pandemic programs. In fact, so many adults asked for Maker Bags for themselves that Lisa Pearson and Shauna Carter in Adult Services began creating Maker Bags specifically for adults. In August, we entered a new phase of our reopening and placed individual desks and chairs around the library so people could sit and read or study individually. We reopened the children's library, but blocked off the story time and play areas to encourage families to browse the shelves, but minimize contact with others. I don't know about you all, but we kind of expected the pandemic to be over by the time the school year started in the fall of 2020. Little did we know. In late summer, we began hearing that a lot more families were planning to homeschool their kids. So Rebecca Brown met with Lori Ortez of the Fast Track program and produced a video of tips for the many families who decided to homeschool their kids that year. Now, most of the school libraries were unstaffed in 2020-21. The school library staff were reassigned to classrooms so students could be split up and socially distanced. Because of this, our patrons couldn't put a hold on a school library book and have it come to the public library for pickup. There just wasn't anybody in the school libraries to do that. This was really tough on homeschooling families. We did subscribe to a database, Scholastic Teachables, that includes worksheets, lessons, and other materials for teaching children from kindergarten through 6th grade, and we still subscribe to that resource. All through the first 18 months of the pandemic, the library was part of the effort to get information and assistance to our community. The Ketchikan EOC gave us masks and hand sanitizer to distribute, and CARES Act applications were available at the library as well. Later, patrons without internet access used library computers to make COVID-19 vaccine appointments and apply for housing assistance with the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. The traditional curse, "May you live in interesting times," certainly applies to the past 2 years. The Tongass Historical Museum had the inspired idea to encourage people to preserve items from this time for future generations by providing everything needed to prepare a time capsule. These could be picked up at the library as well as at the museum, and we couldn't keep them in stock. People took them as soon as we put them out. The Friends of the Ketchikan Public Library lost a major source of revenue during the first year or so of the pandemic because it was not possible to hold either the periodic small book sales in the large meeting room at the library or the big annual sale at the plaza. This was a huge storage problem as well, since the Friends continued to receive donations and the library continued to do its ongoing weeding of older, unused books. The Friends were very fortunate to receive the loan of a downtown space from First Bank, where their books and other items could be stored and sold. This has been a godsend, since books don't have to be moved to a sale site and then back again into storage. Jeff Williams, June Dahl, and the rest of the Friends have done a wonderful job of preparing, stocking, decorating, and staffing the space at 319 Dock Street. Due to budget cuts at the University of Alaska Southeast that impacted the Ketchikan campus, the campus library ended its agreement with the public library and the Ketchikan School District libraries to share our online library system and participate in the sharing of books and other materials. The UAS Ketchikan Campus Library migrated its records to the Alaska Library Catalog that is used by the rest of the University of Alaska system. Kathy Bowling, the UAS Campus Library Manager, and Michelle Lampton, the Library Assistant, still meet with us every month to share information and explore ways that we can work together. As outreach librarian, Rebecca Brown serves many community members who were especially vulnerable during the pandemic. When she couldn't visit the Pioneer Home, the Rendezvous Senior Day Center, or the Saxman Senior Center, she created a monthly newsletter with information, puzzles, and jokes called Here's Some Good News. Rebecca also arranged with the Ketchikan Daily News on a new library column, What's on Your Shelf, featuring local residents and their favorite books. In September 2021, 2 staff members left the library. Rebecca Jackson, who worked in the Children's Library, moved to Seattle. Tammy Dinsmore of Adult and Technical Services retired at the end of September after 23 years at the library. We very much miss Rebecca and Tammy and wish them all the best. In December 2021, we hired Jade Myers to replace Rebecca Jackson in Children's. Due to budget concerns, Tammy's position was left vacant for 2022. Some of the changes we implemented over the pandemic we reversed as soon as it was deemed safe to do so. Others we decided to make permanent. What are those permanent changes? Library staff have learned a lot about how to record, edit, and post video programs. As the pandemic wanes and more programs shift back to an in-person format, we will of course do fewer video programs. But it has been a valuable experience learning to use technology to tell a story, literally and figuratively. Library staff will continue to record the weekly radio program on KRBD, Reading the Classics, which now has a permanent time slot on Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. There's a vast collection of books, poetry, and essays to choose from that are all in the public domain. We're currently reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and we will be reading Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice next. The silver lining of the cloud of losing our partnership with the UAS Ketchikan Campus Library is that the campus library provides library accounts for adult Ketchikan residents, including those who are not affiliated with the university. You can apply for a card there and check out books, use their computers, and request books from other Alaska libraries, about 3 million titles, using the Alaska Library Catalog at the campus library. To simplify the checkout process during the pandemic, we changed the checkout period for DVDs from 1 week to 3 weeks to match the checkout period for books and other materials. This has worked out very well, and we're just going to keep that 3-week DVD loan period. And in March 2022, the library permanently eliminated overdue fines, except in a few special circumstances. Overdue fines are much more of a burden on families with young children, elders, and people in need, and these are the very people who can most benefit from library services. What changes have not yet been reversed, but will be at some point? The library's hours have not yet changed back to pre-pandemic. This has more to do with our vacant position than with the pandemic itself. Once we're fully staffed, we will be able to go back to our pre-pandemic hours. Masks. Masks are optional for patrons and for staff, but when you go into the library, I'm sure you've noticed that most of the staff continue to wear masks. The pandemic is not quite over yet, and many people who visit the library are vulnerable to more severe forms of COVID. To keep our patrons safe, for the time being, we'll continue to wear masks at the library. Plexiglass. For now, the plexiglass remains at the circulation desk and at the public computers. It may or may not stay permanently. It's already showing signs of wear. But we may keep it up until it's too damaged, then take it down and just not replace it. The small craft room is not yet available for nonprofit groups to use for meetings, although the large meeting room and the study rooms are once again available for use. The reason that the craft room is not available is that there is still a big demand for maker bags, so we continue to need space to assemble them. We discontinued maker bags for adults at the end of 2021, but by popular demand, we continue to provide them for children and teens. Because of the time and the space they require, we're going to discontinue these at some point when in-person programming is in full swing. So here we are in 2022. We participated in the 2022 Wearable Art Show, as we normally do in even-numbered years. And in February, we moved all our furniture back into public areas, opened the large meeting room, and took down the wall that blocked off the play area in the children's library. We're not quite back to where we were before the pandemic started, but we've learned a lot, which puts us in a great position to better serve Ketchikan. To that end, this summer we'll be starting the process of preparing a new strategic plan for 2023 through 2027. We will need your help and input to plan the library's future. So thank you in advance for your support. All of this was made possible by our amazing library staff, both past and present, by our friends of the Ketchikan Public Library, by the Library Advisory Board, by the City of Ketchikan, and in particular, the Building Maintenance Department, IT, Streets, and Ketchikan Museums, the Ketchikan Gateway Borough, and, of course, our amazing library patrons and community supporters. Thank you all. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, Pat Tully, Director of the Ketchikan Public Library, at 907-228-2688. 2311 or email me at patt@firstcitylibraries.org.